The National Desk, America's News, now.
The immediate reaction to her resignation is that it is overdue.
Secret Service Director Kim Cheatle is out.
Now we have to pick up the pieces. We have to rebuild the American people's faith and trust in the Secret Service as an agency.
Who's in to take her place as the investigation expands into one of the biggest security failures seen in decades? Nearly 5,000 Delta Airlines flights canceled in just 5 days. How long the problems are expected to last and what the Department of Transportation is doing about it. Then deterring Lyme disease. New details on a vaccine that could have life-changing outcomes as tick populations surge across the U.S. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. Tonight, 10 days after the assassination attempt that almost killed former President Donald Trump, embattled Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle has resigned. The announcement coming just as Cheatle began drawing immense bipartisan blowback on Capitol Hill, criticized by lawmakers on both sides for her inability to answer basic questions on the perceived security failure. Also developing right now, new details on a new bipartisan task force with subpoena power that will investigate this incident further. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins has been tracking the very latest for us. Kayla.
A couple of months old, and
after perhaps the biggest security failure in a generation.
What happened?
The director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle, stepped down from her post Tuesday.
I'm glad she did the right thing. Look, our reaction, the immediate reaction to her resignation is that it is overdue. She should have done this at least a week ago.
The second in command, Ronald Rowe, quickly appointed as acting director. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas writing, "I appreciate his willingness to lead the Secret Service at this incredibly challenging moment." Cheatle stepped down less than 24 hours after a disastrous hearing on Capitol Hill where lawmakers pressed her for answers on the security failures at Donald Trump's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania.
This is not theater. This is not about jockeying. This is about the safety of some of the most highly targeted and valued targets internationally and domestically.
President Biden releasing a statement thanking Director Cheatle for her decades of public service, adding, "As a leader, it takes honor, courage, and incredible integrity to take full responsibility for an organization tasked with one of the most challenging jobs in public service." Also on Tuesday, House Speaker Mike Johnson and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries announcing a bipartisan congressional task force tapped to investigate the Secret Service failures.
I think the moment calls for something unique and different. We need to move quickly. We need to get the answers that the American people deserve.
The task force will be comprised of 7 Republicans and 6 Democrats. Johnson said the members assigned to the effort will be announced later this week.
The composition of the committee will be persons who have expertise in the areas in question.
And Johnson said the task force will publish a report on their investigation into the Secret Service no later than December 31st, and that we can expect interim reports along the way.
And Kayla, what do we know about Ronald Rowe, who's stepping up to serve as the interim Secret Service director?
Well, Amira, Rowe was Kimberly Cheatle's second in command. He's a 24-year veteran of the Secret Service. He previously led the agency's legislative affairs. In an interview last week, he defended Cheatle's leadership, saying she should not resign. Well, now he's in charge and at a very difficult time for this agency. They face numerous investigations, both internal and external, and they have to regain the trust of not just Congress, but also the American people. Amira.
Yeah. It won't be easy to steady the ship, that's for sure. Live from Washington, D.C., Kayla Gaskins, thank you so much for that report. And right now, investigators searching for suspects who started a wildfire in Riverside, California with illegal fireworks seen on surveillance video. Officials say at least 6 homes have been destroyed and 7 damaged from the fire that started on Sunday. 1,500 people were forced to evacuate their homes. The fire is now contained, but the cleanup and rebuilding process has just begun. Delta Airlines is under investigation after days of problems following the CrowdStrike outage that impacted Microsoft users on Friday. Department of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is asking passengers with complaints to contact the DOT directly. The airline, which canceled hundreds of more flights today and could face more problems for the rest of the week, says they are fully cooperating with the new investigation. Meanwhile, House leaders are now calling on CrowdStrike CEO George Kurtz to explain what happened. On top of thousands of flight cancellations, many banks, hospitals, and government offices around the world saw their systems go dark last Friday. About 8.5 million machines running Microsoft's Windows operating systems were impacted. And tonight we are tracking a fatal plane crash. 2 men from Virginia are dead after the aircraft went down over New York. Police saying the small plane took off from MacArthur Airport on Long Island yesterday evening and crashed a few minutes later when the pilot tried to return to the runway. The pilot and the only passenger were killed. The FAA and the NTSB are looking into what may have happened. New details about the mass shooting in Maine last October that killed 18 people. An Army report released today says 3 unidentified Army Reserve officers were disciplined for dereliction of duty after the tragedy. Survivors and victims' family members have been critical over missed opportunities to prevent that attack. Fellow reservists reportedly noticed the gunman exhibiting some delusional and paranoid behavior months earlier, and they failed to escalate those concerns. Those 3 officers may no longer be able to advance in the military. A rare warning today in Arizona about a rise in the fatal Hantavirus spread by rodents. In the first 6 months of 2024, there have been 7 confirmed cases and 3 deaths. From 2016 to 2022, Arizona had 11 cases in total. CDC officials say the country sees about 30 infections a year, mostly west of the Mississippi, and there's no specific treatment for the virus, which makes it so difficult. Researchers believe the high temperatures and heavy rainfall in the Southwest this year is leading to more rodents seeking shelter inside homes. VP and now presidential hopeful Kamala Harris took her campaign to the battleground state of Wisconsin. Today's trip was already scheduled before Biden ended his re-election campaign. But now, as the top of the ticket, voters are watching to see how Harris approaches the issues most important to them and if it's any different to Biden's platform. National correspondent Atrel Nashar has more.
Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris is hitting the ground running.
Good afternoon, Wisconsin!
In her first rally since President Biden left the race, surrounded by new Kamala signs, she's debuting what the Democratic platform looks like with her as the face of the party.
We believe in a future where every person has the opportunity not just to get by, but to get ahead.
Like her predecessor, Harris is expected to run a campaign focused on abortion rights and the future of democracy in an appeal to undecided voters in swing states and beyond.
We who believe in reproductive freedom will stop Donald Trump's extreme abortion bans.
Despite the president's low approval ratings, his top surrogates are now emphasizing the role Harris played in his accomplishments.
In growing jobs, in rebuilding our infrastructure, in bringing manufacturing back to the United States, in reducing prescription drug prices.
Harris expected to be sharper in her attacks than Biden was against former President Trump, rolling out a strategy to contrast her record as a prosecutor with Trump's status as a convicted felon.
Wow!
The Trump-Vance strategy for attacking Harris quickly taking shape as they also tie her to Biden's record and to the crisis at the southern border.
Kamala Harris is America's border czar. And how's our border doing, ladies and gentlemen?
The issues leading the Republican ticket, as was on full display at the RNC, are immigration and the economy.
I will end the illegal immigration crisis by closing our border and finishing the wall.
There's a little more than 100 days until Election Day, so some voters are just tuning in. But others have a lot of questions about why the president left the race. And he'll speak about that from the Oval Office on Wednesday night.
In Washington, I'm Atrell Nashar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Atra, thank you. Convicted Senator Bob Menendez will resign on August 20th. The bipartisan Senate Ethics Committee unanimously voted yesterday in favor of the investigating rules violations following Menendez's conviction on 16 felony counts, including bribery, wire fraud, and acting as a foreign agent. Up until now, Senator Menendez had refused to resign and refuted earlier reports that he intended to give up his seat last week. The man charged with killing Tupac may be getting out of jail for now. A judge is considering releasing Dwayne Keffe D. Davis on house arrest. He's charged in rap icon Tupac Shakur's 1996 killing. Davis, in jail since September, was in a Nevada courtroom today as the judge heard arguments. He's pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. The judge said to expect a written order with her decision. Coming up, President Biden is back in D.C. tonight after a bout of COVID, how he's doing, and the latest on his plans to address the nation. Then a closer look at what's being done to stop the flow of dangerous Glock switches that convert handguns into machine guns. And later, conch off the Florida coast are threatened by things like over-harvesting. What's being done to save the iconic species? President Biden back in Washington, D.C. this evening. This video capturing the president for the first time since dropping his re-election bid as he boarded Air Force One from Delaware. And you can see him mask in hand here. He just tested negative for COVID after being diagnosed last week. While on the tarmac, reporters asked him how he was feeling, to which he replied, well. His return coming just a day before he's expected to give a big prime-time address to the nation. Tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, Biden will break his silence on his decision to drop his re-election bid, which he announced on Sunday amidst fierce divisions within the Democratic Party over his candidacy. Then on Thursday, the president is scheduled to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who's now in Washington, gearing up to address Congress to gain support for his country's now 10-month military campaign in Gaza. Biden says he will broker a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas before the end of his term in office, though the path forward at this point remains unclear. Home sales in June fell almost 5.5% from their levels in May to their lowest point so far this year. The drop was more than 2% higher than experts expected. Meanwhile, median single home prices hit their highest number ever, according to the National Association of Realtors. Mortgage rates have been in a slight decline lately, but have remained roughly steady near 7%, which could change depending on what the Fed decides to do with national interest rates when it meets next week. It'll soon be a bit easier to bring a dog into the country. The CDC updated its rules again following pushback against stricter guidance released in May. Dog owners will no longer need a USDA-enforced endorsed rabies vaccine certificate as long as they're coming from a country at low or no risk of rabies. They'll still need to submit a dog import form, and dogs will have to be at least 6 months of age and also microchipped. That change goes into effect on August 1st. Pfizer is one step closer to a Lyme disease vaccination. The company started late state trials of a 3-dose vaccination series in patients and will watch them until the end of the Lyme disease season next year. Roughly 476,000 people get Lyme disease each year. Without immediate antibiotic treatment, symptoms can become debilitating and chronic. So far, no safety concerns have been noticed in the trials, and Pfizer is hoping for final approval by 2026. Home testing programs may help slow the number of cases of sexually transmitted infections, now on the rise. Medical reporter Liz Bonis explains how.
Hey there, everybody. The CDC now considers sexually transmitted infections, or STIs, a public health priority. Testing right now critical, they say, to stop the spread, especially those kind of infections that get passed on to the littlest of lives. For example, congenital syphilis, where the infection is passed to a baby at birth, which can have lifelong complications, now up 30% in the past 5 years.
One congenital syphilis case is a lot.
Dr. Steve Fagans told me syphilis cases are the highest they've been overall in 70 years. Just in his area of monitoring in Southwest Ohio, he's already seen 7 cases of congenital syphilis.
The child is born with congenital syphilis and has to be treated for 10 days with intravenous penicillin.
The preferred antibiotic to treat syphilis was in short supply for a while. That may have influenced numbers. But an online culture of easy sexual encounters can also influence these numbers. Rich McLean, the chief operating officer of Preventix, which offers no-cost and low-cost STI home testing kits, says they've seen the same kinds of jump in numbers in other STIs as well, including
HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C.
Preventix, now one of several companies expanding in the U.S. and partnering with health departments across the country to make home testing kits easily accessible. They instruct people on how to use them and confidentially share accurate results. Preventix provided this video.
Our mission really is to allow everybody to enjoy their lives and have the sex that they want to have sex, and it might sound a little bit taboo, but really it's, that's one of our values, is around human.
To confidentially request a test kit online,
there's a short questionnaire that you fill out, and it will tailor what test you're going to get to you with your answers to those questions.
The Kids Online Safety Act could finally be headed to the Senate floor this week after years of delay. The bill seeks to reduce harmful content that incites suicidal tendencies of underage social media users that whistleblower documents say companies like Meta knew existed on their platforms. Now there are more than 70 co-sponsors, and the bill could pass before members leave D.C. in August. Spotlight on America's investigations are being cited by a U.S. senator as part of a push to crack down on illegal parts that turn handguns into machine guns. National investigative correspondent Lisa Fletcher has done multiple investigations on the surge of these so-called Glock switches that are putting police and communities in danger. Now, U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley wants to know what law enforcement agencies are doing about it.
In a series of letters to top law enforcement agencies, including ATF, Customs and Border Protection, Homeland Security, and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, Senator Chuck Grassley asks what the agencies are doing to detect and deter foreign actors targeting American buyers with Glock switches, illegal devices about the size of a nickel that turn a handgun into a machine gun, capable of firing at least 10 shots per second.
A matter of less than a minute, you can have one switched out and ready to utilize the firearm.
Grassley's letters included our reports, citing rampant illegal sales we discovered online through apps like TikTok and Telegram, and crimes involving Glock switches across the country and here in D.C. where in 2022, 4 people were shot, including a 12-year-old girl, when a gunman, who we learned had at least one weapon outfitted with a Glock switch, sprayed bullets from a 5th-floor apartment into a busy neighborhood. Just last fall, the feds arrested Shaheem Roberson in Ohio for allegedly buying and selling illegal firearms parts. The 15-page federal indictment details how Roberson purchased Glock switches from suppliers in Russia and China and used social media to sell them here in the U.S. We arranged for a special demonstration of the devices with ATF in the nation's capital.
It's pushing down on your actual trigger bar, keeping it from resetting, and that's what's causing it to fire automatically.
I fired 15 rounds in less than 2 seconds. Grassley's letters ask how the devices, especially from China and Russia, are getting into the U.S., what's being done to detect and intercept them, and if there is a concerted effort by foreign adversaries to flood American streets with these illegal devices.
You know, the concern is that they're everywhere out there on the streets.
ATF Acting Special Agent in Charge, Michael Waddell, says these devices aren't going to upstanding citizens.
Typically what we find is that someone that's not going through the process to necessarily register a Glock switch or to make it legal, that they're using it for criminal or nefarious purposes.
Between 2017 and 2021, ATF saw a 510% increase in Glock switches, and that's just one law enforcement agency. 2022 numbers are yet to be made public, but officials say expect to see an even higher jump as the numbers just keep climbing. For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
Lisa, thank you. And coming up, certain protections for homeless people in California are ending. The steps San Francisco will now take to stop them from sleeping on the streets. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America.
We are going to be very aggressive and assertive in moving encampments, which may even include criminal penalties.
That was San Francisco's mayor, fed up with the large homeless population taking over the city. With the new Supreme Court ruling passed on June 28th, cities can now arrest, cite, and fine homeless people sleeping in public places. This ruling overturns 6 years of legal protections for homeless people in California.
Well, for the last 6 years, we've been in legal limbo where you have people that are sleeping in public spaces. Even though we have a bed for them to go to, they just don't want to leave.
Fresno City Council member Mike Carbasi, who represents District 2, says with this ruling, Fresno now needs to follow San Francisco's footsteps.
Sharon and Bill Saxton come to the Wesley Chapel Methodist Church Cemetery at least once a week.
Her smile, everyone knew her for her smile.
They visit their daughter Leslie, killed at 30 years old in a car crash, and her unborn son.
I know it's been 17 years, but you know, it's still so hard.
And for the last 2 years, it's gotten even harder. Last year, the Saxtons filed this complaint with the state. They claimed Their daughter was buried in the wrong plot.
According to the state, cemeteries in Ohio need to keep records as to who owns these plots and who is buried where. But the only record that has emerged from this case is a hand-drawn map, and clearly the state says it has a lot more questions.
Take a look at your screen. This is video the dive team took firsthand of their research in the Keys. The team counted more than 1,200 individual conch. The goal was to locate conch communities and tag them with GPS devices to see where they go over time. Researchers found these conch communities are close to shore, and according to them, that discovery is surprising and also worrisome given the threats of dredging and coastal development. The goal is for the dive team to have the information and resources needed to safely relocate these conch communities if they're being impacted.
And coming up, the famous musician who will sing at the Olympics opening ceremony in Paris this Friday in what's being called a comeback performance. Singer Celine Dion is making her big comeback at the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. She is set to perform during the opening ceremony on Friday. It will be the French-Canadian legend's first time on stage since ending her tour in 2022. Dion was diagnosed with stiff person syndrome, a rare neurological condition that causes painful and severe muscle spasms. She's been out of the spotlight since her diagnosis, but recently emerged in a harrowing documentary called I Am Celine that really showcased her struggle. But Dion won't be the only familiar face you see. We're also learning that American rapper Snoop Dogg will be among the torchbearers carrying the Olympic flame in the final stretch before the opening ceremony. So we've got a lot to look forward to, and it all kicks off on Friday afternoon live from Paris's River Scene at 1:30 Eastern Time. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. We do invite you to join us again this evening for more coverage on America's top stories. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching.